The sun was lowering behind the wide Arizona sky, painting everything in shades of gold and red. The land was quiet except for the soft rustle of wind moving through dry grass. A lone cowboy named Ethan Cole rode slowly along the edge of a narrow trail that led to a small lake hidden between the rocks. He had been out since sunrise, checking his cattle and fixing fences broken by the last storm. Dust covered his boots and the back of his neck burned from the long day under the sun. He was thinking about heading home when his horse, a tall brown mare named Daisy, twitched her ears and stopped. Ethan listened carefully. At first there was only the sound of the water rippling in the lake. Then he heard it, a voice calling out, faint and frightened. He frowned and looked around. The voice came again, this time clearer and trembling. "Cowboy, please help me!" Ethan's heart gave a little jump. He turned his horse toward the sound and rode a few steps closer to the lake. Near the far end of the water, half hidden by tall reeds, he saw movement. A young woman was standing there, the sunlight shining off her dark hair. She was trying to hide herself behind the bushes. Her voice came again, soft and embarrassed. "They stole my clothes, cowboy." "Please don't look this way." Ethan quickly turned his face toward the ground, feeling his ears go red. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I ain't looking." "Tell me what happened." His voice was calm and deep, carrying honesty that made her trust him. The woman's name was Tala. She was from a nearby Apache village and had come to this lake to wash and rest before returning home. While she bathed, some travelers passed through the area. They saw her things left on a rock and took them, her clothes, her small bag, and the medicine she was carrying for her sick mother. She was left alone, frightened and helpless. Ethan listened carefully. He didn't interrupt, just nodded as she spoke. He reached behind his saddle, took out a heavy blanket, and tossed it gently toward the reeds. "Here, you can cover yourself," he said quietly without turning around. Tala hesitated, then picked up the blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was large and warm, smelling faintly of horse and campfire. She stepped out slowly, her face red but grateful. When Ethan finally looked up, he saw her properly for the first time. Her long hair was damp, and her dark eyes carried a quiet strength even though she was clearly shaken. He could see she was proud but trying hard not to cry. He gave her a kind smile. "You're safe now. Nobody's gonna bother you," he said. Tala nodded and tried to thank him, but her voice broke. She sat down on a flat rock near the shore, holding the blanket tightly. "They took the medicine," she whispered after a moment. "It was for my mother. Without it, she won't get better." Ethan stood still for a while, watching the sunset fade behind the hills. Something stirred deep inside him. He had lost people too, his wife many years ago and his little boy to a fever he couldn't stop. He knew what it felt like to stand helpless. He took a breath and said, "Then we'll find it." Tala looked up in surprise. "You'd help me?" she asked softly. He nodded. "It's the right thing to do." Ethan helped her climb onto his horse while he walked beside, leading Daisy carefully through the rocky trail. The air was getting cooler and the first stars began to shine. As they moved, the sound of crickets filled the silence. Ethan kept his eyes on the ground, following the trail of wagon wheels that led away from the lake. Tala held the blanket tight around her shoulders. For a while, they didn't speak, but there was a sense of quiet trust growing between them. After some time, Ethan broke the silence. "You from the Apache village near the canyon?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, about half a day's ride from here. My mother is the healer there. She was hurt last winter, and I went to the trader's post to get herbs and medicine for her. Now they're gone." Her voice trembled. "She needs them soon." Ethan looked up at the sky where a thin moon was rising. "We'll get them back, miss," he said. "People like that can't go too far." They followed the wagon tracks until they came to an old campfire. The ashes were still warm. Ethan knelt down, touching the dirt. He found a small piece of cloth, the edge of her medicine pouch. He held it up, showing it to her. Tala gasped. "That's mine," she said. They stopped here. Ethan looked around carefully. There were boot prints leading away from the fire toward the west. "They're heading to the river crossing," he said. "We'll reach them by morning." The night air grew cold. Ethan built a small shelter under the low branches of a mesquite tree using his saddle, canvas, and some dry wood. Tala sat near the small fire he started, her face lit by the glow. The warmth made her relax a little. Ethan poured water from his canteen and handed her a small biscuit from his saddlebag. She took it with a quiet thank you. After a while, Tala spoke softly. You didn't have to stop, Cowboy. You could have ridden away. Ethan poked the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise. Maybe, he said, but a man's got to do what's right. If I walked away, I'd never sleep easy again. Tala smiled faintly. She studied his face in the flickering light, lined with age, strong but kind. You're not like most men, she said gently. Ethan chuckled, looking down. Maybe that's why I live alone. For a moment, they were quiet again, listening to the soft whisper of the wind. Tala pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. Thank you, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. For helping me. For not laughing at me. Ethan shook his head. There's nothing to laugh at. You've got courage, miss, more than most folks I know. He lay back on the ground, looking up at the stars. You ever notice how quiet it gets out here at night? He said. Almost feels like the world's holding its breath. Tala followed his gaze. In our stories, she said, we believe the stars are the eyes of our ancestors. They watch to see if we're kind. Ethan smiled at that. Then I reckon they've got a good view tonight. Tala laughed softly, a small, gentle sound that broke the silence. It had been a long time since Ethan had heard someone laugh near him. It reminded him of evenings long ago when his wife used to hum while cooking by the fire. The memory hurt a little, but it also brought warmth. As the night deepened, rain began to fall lightly. Ethan stood up and adjusted the shelter so the drops wouldn't reach her. He handed her his jacket as well. Keep this, he said. It'll stop the chill. She tried to refuse. You'll get cold. I've been colder, he said simply, settling near the fire. The rain fell steady for a while, tapping gently on the canvas. The sound was peaceful. Tala closed her eyes, finally able to rest after a day filled with fear and embarrassment. Ethan kept watch quietly, staring into the distance where the tracks disappeared into the dark. When the rain stopped, the air smelled clean and the ground glistened under the moonlight. Ethan looked at the sleeping woman wrapped in his blanket, her breathing slow and calm. For a long moment he just stood there, realizing how strange life could be. A few hours ago he had been alone, riding home to an empty house. Now he had a purpose again, helping a stranger who had trusted him without knowing his name. He smiled faintly, tipping his hat down as he sat beside the fire. We'll get your medicine back, he whispered to himself. You have my word. The night stretched on, quiet and still except for the crackle of the fire. The stars above looked down, cold and bright, while the lake far behind them shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere in the silence between the rustling leaves and the soft rhythm of her breathing, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, a reason to care again. When the morning light touched the hills, Ethan woke to the soft sound of birds near the trees. The fire had burned down to warm ashes, and a thin mist floated over the ground. Tala was still asleep, wrapped in the cowboy's blanket. For a moment, Ethan watched her quietly. There was something peaceful about her face, like the land itself had decided to rest. He stood up, stretched his arms, and began to pack his things. When she opened her eyes, she smiled shyly, brushing the hair from her face. You kept watch all night? She asked softly. Old habit, Ethan said with a small smile. Couldn't sleep much anyway. Figured I'd let you rest. She thanked him again, her eyes full of gratitude. The blanket still hung over her shoulders. I'll return this to you once we reach my village, she said. Don't worry about that, he replied. Let's just find your medicine first. They followed the wagon trail west, where the ground sloped down toward a dry riverbed. The morning air was cool, and the scent of wet earth rose with every step. Ethan walked beside the horse, his hand resting on the reins, while Tala rode quietly, holding on to the saddle horn. From time to time she looked around as if the land itself might guide her. They crossed a narrow stream and climbed up a small ridge. From the top, Ethan spotted something in the distance, an old wagon lying half-tilted near a clump of trees. The wooden wheels were cracked, and a few empty barrels lay scattered nearby. That could be it, he said, pointing. As they approached, Tala's heart began to pound. She jumped down before the horse stopped and hurried to the wagon. Inside, among bits of torn cloth and old food sacks, she found a small leather pouch tied with red thread. Her fingers trembled as she opened it and saw the herbs and bottles she had carried from the trader's post. Tears filled her eyes. It's all here, she whispered, clutching it tightly. My mother will live. Ethan smiled, watching her face light up with relief. Then our job here's done, he said, dusting off his gloves. Tala turned to him, her eyes shining in the sunlight. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "No need," he answered simply. "Seeing you smile is plenty, thanks." They shared a quiet moment by the broken wagon. The world around them was still, and only the sound of wind passing through the grass filled the air. Then Tala tied the pouch carefully and tucked it close to her chest. "Please," she said, "come with me to my village. My mother will want to thank you herself." Ethan hesitated. "Your folks might not take kindly to a stranger like me," he said softly. "They will," she assured him. "You helped their daughter. That means something." He finally nodded. "All right, then." The journey to her village took most of the day. They rode across open plains where the grass moved like waves in the wind. Once in a while, they stopped under a shade tree to rest and share a little food. Tala spoke about her people, their traditions, and the songs they sang during the harvest moon. Ethan listened with quiet interest, sometimes smiling at her stories. It had been years since he'd heard someone talk with such warmth. In return, he told her a little about his life, the small ranch he kept, the horse he raised from a colt, and how quiet his days had become. "After my wife passed, I figured I'd just stay busy with work," he said. "Didn't talk much to anyone." Tala looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe life brought you here today for a reason," she said. He chuckled softly. "Maybe so." As the sun dropped lower, they reached a narrow valley surrounded by tall red cliffs. Smoke rose in the distance from cooking fires. When they entered the Apache village, children came running, shouting excitedly. People stepped out of their huts, curious about the tall cowboy riding in beside one of their own. Tala's mother, a gentle-looking woman with silver hair, came forward slowly, leaning on a carved stick. Tala jumped down and ran to her, kneeling beside her feet. "Mama, I found the medicine," she said joyfully. "This man helped me." Her mother smiled and touched her daughter's face. She turned to Ethan and spoke in her native language, her tone warm and sincere. Tala translated softly. "She says you are a good man. A man with a clean heart." Ethan tipped his hat politely. "I'm just glad I could help," he said. The villagers invited him to stay for supper. They sat around a fire as the sky turned deep purple. The smell of roasted corn and herbs filled the air. Children laughed nearby while Tala's mother prepared tea. Ethan felt strangely at ease, though he had never sat among them before. Tala sat across from him, smiling now and then, and he found himself smiling back without thinking. When it was time to leave, Tala's mother handed him a folded cloth, wrapped with care. "She wants you to have this," Tala said. "It's a shawl she made herself." Ethan took it carefully, unfolding the soft fabric. It was hand-woven with bright red and gold patterns that shimmered in the firelight. He ran his rough fingers over the threads and nodded. "Tell her I'll take good care of it." He stood to go, and Tala walked with him to the edge of the village. The moon was bright above them, shining over the sand and cliffs. "Will I see you again, cowboy?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe someday," he said. "You know where to find me, near that lake." She laughed softly, her eyes warm. "Then I will come." He touched the brim of his hat and rode away into the quiet desert night. Days turned into weeks. Ethan went back to his ranch and settled into his old rhythm, feeding cattle, fixing fences, and riding the boundaries of his land. Yet something had changed. Every time he looked at the red shawl hanging by his fireplace, he thought of Tala, the way she smiled, the courage he had shown, and the peace he'd felt near her village. The loneliness that once filled his house didn't seem as heavy anymore. One afternoon, as he rode near the same lake where they first met, he noticed someone standing by the water's edge. His heart skipped when he saw her. Tala was there, holding a small basket filled with wild herbs. She turned as he approached, smiling wide. "I came to return your hat," she said, holding it up. It was the same old hat he had dropped that first evening when she called out to him for help. He had completely forgotten about it. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Guess fate decided it was time you brought it back." She grinned playfully. "Or maybe fate wanted to see if you'd still come here." He got down from his horse and took the hat, brushing the dust off. "Well, I couldn't stay away from this place too long," he said. "It's got a few good memories now." They walked along the lake, talking about simple things, the crops in her village, the new calf born on his ranch, the changing weather. The sky was bright blue, and the reflection of the clouds floated across the still water. Every now and then their eyes met, and both looked away quickly, smiling to themselves. When it was time for her to go, Tala said softly, You gave me more than help. Ethan, you gave me hope. He looked at her, surprised. I didn't do much. You cared, she said. That's enough. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched as she walked along the shore, her figure slowly blending with the light and dust of the horizon. The wind lifted her hair, and for a moment the world seemed quieter than ever. That evening, when Ethan returned home, he hung his hat beside the red shawl. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting shadows that danced across the room. For the first time in many years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. From that day on, whenever he rowed past the lake, he would glance toward the far shore, half expecting to see her standing there. Sometimes she was, gathering herbs, smiling at him from across the water. Other times she wasn't, but he still smiled anyway because the memory was enough. Ethan had always believed his life would end quietly, alone on the ranch. But life had given him something unexpected, a reminder that kindness once given has a way of finding its way back. He didn't need promises or big words. The look in Tala's eyes that day by the water was enough to tell him that their paths, though different, would never truly part, and so, the cowboy and the Apache woman, two strangers who met by chance at a lonely lake, remained forever connected by one small act of help and a kindness that changed both their hearts.